Hi, this is Sean from Time and Talk. Today's video is going to be about some very big news, or rather some very small news, 1mm worth of news to be exact. So, Rolex have updated 4 of their models for the 2020 releases, and it was a bit cruel really, because the lead up, everyone was like, oh, is there going to be a blue Submariner in steel and things like that, and they were heavily hinting at it with the advertising campaign, but you couldn't exactly see what it was. It turns out that the new releases are actually a revamp of 3 lines. So the Submariner, the Sky Dweller, the OP, and the Datejust. So I'll just run through them and then I'll give a bit of an opinion on what I think of them. And obviously hit me in the comments what you think of the new releases. It's a little bit divisive as always. It's a normal kind of Rolex doing what they do best, or not doing what they do best as it is. I'm not going to dwell upon the fact that a lot of us won't be able to access them because of waiting lists and things like that, because that's really old news. I think what is coming up nowadays a lot more is a lack of Rolex sports models in particular on the second-hand market. It's been happening for a while, but it seems to be getting worse. So in terms of the new lines that Rolex have introduced, the first being the Datejust 41mm. So it's an update to the movement and to the case, and it's in line with the updates that were made either last year or the year before. I can't remember of the 36mm Datejust, and the 31mm used to be called the mid-size, but I imagine it's fundamentally marketed at ladies nowadays. The Sky Dweller. So the Sky Dweller was first released in 2012, and essentially this is an update to the strap, and that's all it amounts to. So the Sky Dweller line, it's got 2 time zones, and it's got an annual calendar, and it's quite an ingenious way in which Rolex show these things on the dial. But this new version of the Sky Dweller, it's essentially the old Sky Dweller on an Oysterflex bracelet, which is essentially a rubber strap. That's the only update that I can tell them. The movement's the same. The case, as far as I can tell, is the same, but they've updated the bracelet slightly, which is cool. It's 42mm. It's not really for me. It's too big for a dress style watch, but it is a cool watch. It's very, very expensive. It's about 40 grand or something like that, so way out my price range. Then you've got the OP. So the Oyster Perpetual, they've done an interesting thing with this line, and formerly you could get 34mm, 36mm and 39mm, the 3230, but now they have released interesting dial colours and variations, which are quite bright coloured. I'll put some of them up on the screen. And 41mm seems huge for a no date, kind of all dial, no bezel watch. I'm wearing the Explorer, and this is 39, and it wears pretty big for a 39, to be honest. It wears bigger than some of the 40mm sports watches. And 41, I can't really understand who it would be aimed at, because my understanding of the OP line is that if you want a Rolex that's not really Rolexy, you appreciate the quality and things like that, but you don't want something that's bling or something that's overtly Rolex, you might go for the OP. And making it 41, aside from if you've got a really, really big wrist, it doesn't really make sense to me. I'd wear the 34 or the 36. Yeah, I don't really get the 41mm sizing. And the really, really big news was the update to the Submariner line. So essentially what has happened is the whole lineup has been updated and released and re-released at the same time. So you've got the 2-tone versions, you've got the modern iteration of the Hulk, you've got the blue, white, gold version, which I think the teaser suggested that it could be a steel, but it was always unlikely with Tudor releasing the Black Bay in blue. But you've got the white gold version, but slightly changed in its sizing. So the biggest news obviously was the 41mm sizing. So essentially what seems to have happened is that the case size has been increased in terms of its diameter to 41mm from 40mm. The lugs have been thinned down a little bit, and the case profile has got a little bit thinner. Apparently the bracelet's gone to 21mm, which is a little bit upsetting in a way. 19mm, 21mm lug widths are kind of a pain to get straps for, But to be honest, modern Rolexes, in my opinion, look a little bit rubbish on aftermarket straps, so it probably won't be that big of a deal. Then you've got the movements, the 3230 for the no date version, and the 3235 for the date version, which has existed for a while, but it's just coming into this lineup. And some updates to the movement include a chronergy escapement, which is apparently used to make the watch more efficient over time, and also the fact that it's got a longer power reserve, so it's got a 70-hour power reserve. So the watch is being updated fundamentally, really, but in tiny increments. So you've got that 1mm in additional size. Then you've got the movement, which will perform better on a day-to-day basis in pretty much every way. So the 4 new lines, not new as such, and we know that from Rolex. We don't expect massive revolutions. I think people were predicting things like a white Explorer and things like that, and if they would have released a white Explorer, I would have been amazed, because you know that's not the kind of thing that Rolex does. But in terms of the 41mm sub, which is the biggest news, I'm a little bit disappointed by the changes, because I've got a very, very skinny wrist, so 6¼ inches, and the new super case variant of the Submariner is already, for me, too big. And I think going that 1mm is, for me, making it even more too big. Apparently the watch wears better, wears more slim, wears more nicely, but you can't escape the fact that if you look at the pictures of the watch, it's still a modern Rolex in that it's a big watch and it's a chunky watch, and that's not something that I would really go for. It's kind of interesting that Rolex is kind of going more and more away from the tradition of Rolex, if you like, and the tool watches at 40mm with character, if you like, to more of a more bling, perhaps. And perhaps I think in the next few years we're going to see a really fundamental price increase to, you know, AP levels, perhaps, because at the end of the day there's no point in not doing that, because these watches, the GMT for example, is trading at double its retail, so why not make the money yourself if you're Rolex, rather than giving it to resellers? In some ways it's kind of a genius move by Rolex, because what you've got is you've got a new 41mm case on the Submariner. Immediately everyone who wants the 40 is going to buy that, so that becomes more successful. And also the older models become more sought after, but also it will make some people really, really happy, the new size. So in terms of the strategy, for me it's really brilliant. In terms of what the feel seems to be, what the reaction seems to be, it seems to be a little bit mixed, as always, but some people are kind of like, you know, we waited this long for a 1mm, you know, size increase rather than the white Explorer or the blue steel Submariner. Some people will be happy about it. I think a lot of Rolex buyers, perhaps people with bigger wrists, perhaps people with a lot of money to spend on a luxury watch, will not be bothered about that 1mm increase, because at the end of the day it's not a big deal. For someone like me who's more into the more traditional sizes and the older Rolexes, it's gutting really. And it'll be interesting to see if that 1mm size increase translates to the other models, so whether the GMT becomes 41, you know, the Explorer 2 has already gone to 42, so they're going in that direction of kind of bigger sizes. And is that because they want the watches to be more noticeable on the wrist? You know, it's a luxury brand, it's not a sports watch maker, they don't make tool watches. But anyway, just some reflections there. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on the 4 new Rolex releases. In terms of my own opinion, I'm not that happy with the changes, but you know, it's not really a big deal in terms of the Submariner's 1mm size increase for most people, I think. So let me know what you think about the increases, the changes, and the updates to the other models as well. If you like my video, please subscribe. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.